So, what if the reason you can't focus on one thing for more than, say, 10 minutes has absolutely nothing to do with your willpower?
Right, which is what we all immediately assume. We just think we're failing.
Exactly. We completely blame ourselves. But what if it's actually just a biological glitch in how your nervous system is processing something as harmless as an email notification?
It's a really profound shift in perspective.
It really is. I mean, if you are feeling mentally drained right now, or just overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information you have to process every day, or even if you're just finding it strangely difficult to hold on to a basic train of thought, you've probably blamed yourself.
Oh, absolutely. We all do.
But the stack of sources we are diving into today, it completely upends that entire narrative. We're doing a deep dive into the foundations of cognitive wellness.
And it is such a necessary conversation right now.
Yeah, and our mission today is to define what cognitive wellness actually means, especially when you strip away the hype, the aggressive self-improvement language, and all that endless hustle culture.
I think it's incredibly important to strip all of that away because the messaging we constantly get about our brains is just, it's
It
relentless.
really is.
Modern culture almost exclusively frames human cognition through these rigid performance metrics. The underlying message is basically that your brain is a factory.
Right, like an assembly line.
Exactly. And the goal is always to just focus harder, think faster, and optimize your output, regardless of whatever environmental conditions you're actually dealing with.
We treat ourselves like hardware, like we just need to download a quick software patch, close out some background apps, and suddenly we'll run faster.
That is the exact mindset that gets us into trouble.
But wait, before we completely throw out the idea of pushing ourselves, isn't a little bit of stress actually good for us? I mean, I've read plenty of research on neuroplasticity that says you require some level of strain or friction to force the brain to grow.
Yes.
So how do we draw the line between healthy cognitive strain, the kind that makes you sharper, and the systemic overload you're talking about?
That is the perfect distinction to make, and it really comes down to a biological concept.
Hmm.
It's the difference between hormetic stress and allostatic load.
Okay, hormetic stress. What is that?
Hormetic stress is the good kind. It's acute, it's short-term. So think about lifting a heavy weight. Your muscles tear slightly, they recover, and then they grow stronger.
Right, or like wrestling with a really complex math problem. You feel frustrated, but eventually you figure it out.
Exactly, your neural pathways adapt.
Yeah.
But the key component of hormetic stress, the most important part, is that it has a clear endpoint, and it is followed by a period of deep recovery.
So the stress turns on, does its job, and then definitively turns off.
Precisely. But what the sources reveal is that modern life has fundamentally replaced that acute resolvable stress with chronic, low-grade, inescapable stress.
And that's the allostatic load.
Yes,
Yes.
that is allostatic load. And that biological glitch you mentioned earlier, it happens because our nervous systems evolved to handle immediate physical threats, like literally running from a predator.
Which we don't really do anymore.
No, we don't. But when you get a Slack notification from your boss at, say, 8 o'clock at night, your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, it doesn't know the difference between a looming deadline and a looming predator.
Oh, wow. So it just reacts the exact same way.
It triggers the exact same biological cascade.
Yeah.
It floods your entire system with adrenaline and cortisol.
And because we never actually sprint away from our laptop to bring off that adrenaline, I mean, we just sit there on the couch and the emails just keep coming. The stress response never completes its cycle.
It never completes. It gets locked in the on position.
Mm.
And this is exactly where the whole biohacking and extreme productivity mindset fundamentally misunderstands how human cognition operates.
How so?
Well, when you try to force an already overloaded brain to simply output more, like maybe you chug another energy drink or you try to aggressively hack your focus, you are essentially just pouring more cortisol onto an already inflamed system.
You're just adding to the allostatic load.
Exactly. The literature we reviewed makes it abundantly clear. Cognitive wellness is heavily influenced by nervous system balance. You simply cannot optimize a system that is actively in a state of biological alarm.
I mean, that reframes so much of what we call brain fog.
It really does.
The sources point out that when people experience cognitive fatigue, it is almost never a lack of motivation or discipline. But let's look at the actual mechanism there. Why does chronic stress literally make us lose our focus?
It's all about a reallocation of resources. When your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, is constantly activated by these little microstressors all day, your brain prioritizes immediate survival over deep contemplative thought.
Right, survival first.
Always. Blood flow literally shifts away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the part that handles complex problem-solving and sustained attention, and it moves toward the deeper, more reactive parts of the brain.
Wow. So you lose your focus because your biology is purposely shutting down your deep thinking centers.
Yes, to keep you hypervigilant to threats.
It's sort of like driving a car while resting your foot slightly on the brake pedal. Like you can still hit 60 miles an hour if you slam the gas, but your engine is burning twice the fuel, it's overheating, and eventually the brake pads are going to catch fire.
That is a brilliant analogy. Yes.
Because that's what chronic microstress does to our cognitive output, right? We are burning massive amounts of biological energy just trying to maintain basic baseline functioning.
That analogy hits the nail on the head, and it completely explains the most alarming trend practitioners are noticing right now in the wellness space.
What's that?
The sources highlight that individuals today aren't just struggling with stress itself. They're struggling with a profound crisis of recovery, because that foot never comes off the brake pedal. The return to a baseline of calm and restoration it never happens.
Oh, hold on, let's play devil's advocate for a second. If we accept that my brain isn't broken, it's just overloaded, I still have to live in reality. I have a mortgage to pay, I have a 9-to-5 job, I have family obligations, I can't just move to a cabin in the woods to heal my nervous system. So if I just sit on the couch at the end of the day to rest, shouldn't my body naturally just start recovering?
You would think so. But sitting on the couch doesn't automatically equate to nervous system recovery, especially not in the modern environment.
Because of our phones.
Exactly. Let's look at what usually happens on that couch. We all know doom scrolling is bad for us.
Yeah.
That is old news. But what the sources reveal that is truly fascinating is what happens chemically in the brain when we try to rest while we remain tethered to digital inputs.
Right, because we are scrolling through like emotionally charged news or comparing ourselves to someone on social media or even just rapidly switching context between, a funny cat video and a tragic news story.
Yes. And every single one of those context switches requires a microcalculation by your brain. You are asking your prefrontal cortex to process an astonishing volume of varied emotional data.
So even though my body is physically still on the couch like I'm resting, my nervous system is sprinting a marathon.
Exactly. There is no shift from the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest state, that is where actual recovery happens.
This actually brings up one of the most honestly surprising data points we found in the stack of sources. It's about just the physical presence of our devices.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Right. The sources discuss how even having your phone visible on the desk, placed completely face down and on silent, it actively drains your cognitive bandwidth.
The mechanism behind that perfectly illustrates this recovery deficit we're talking about. The brain works on something called inhibitory control.
Inhibitory control. Okay.
When your phone is in your peripheral vision, part of your brain is constantly aware that a portal to infinite information, dopamine, and potential threats is sitting right there. So your brain has to actively spend metabolic energy to suppress the urge to reach for it.
It's basically running a background program that just says, don't check the phone, don't check the phone, don't check the phone.
Yes, and that burns fuel.
That is wild.
It can actually reduce your working memory and fluid intelligence by up to 15%. Just by being in the room.
15%.
Just by being there.
Yeah.
Now, compound that subtle, constant energy drain with the fact that most people are taking these devices into their beds at night. This is where the recovery deficit becomes a literal physiological crisis.
Let's talk about the sleep component because the research here, it completely changes how you view a restless night. What is actually happening in the brain when we transition from absorbing all this emotionally charged information straight into trying to sleep?
So, when you look at the biology of sleep, it is not merely an absence of wakefulness. It is a highly active mechanical cleaning process.
Like a wash cycle.
Precisely. When you finally enter deep sleep, a network in your brain called the glymphatic system activates. Cerebrospinal fluid literally washes through your brain tissue. It clears out the metabolic waste and the neurotoxins that build up during the day.
The sources called it like a street sweeper for your neural pathways.
That's a great way to picture it.
But if your cortisol levels are elevated because you were just reading a stressful email at 11 p.m., what happens to that cleaning process?
It gets entirely disrupted. Elevated cortisol suppresses the architecture of your sleep. So you might be unconscious, you're asleep, but you aren't dipping into the restorative deep sleep phases long enough for the glymphatic system to actually do its job.
So you wake up the next morning and that metabolic waste is literally still sitting there in your brain.
Exactly. That is the physical reality of brain fog. It is a brain that literally hasn't been washed.
Wow. And this creates such a vicious cycle. You wake up with a brain that hasn't fully cleared its metabolic waste. You feel groggy, you can't focus. So what do?
You reach for coffee?
You reach for a massive cup of coffee, which spikes your adrenaline and cortisol again. It masks the fatigue, but it further locks your nervous system into that fight or flight state. You push through the day using sheer adrenaline, which exhausts you even more, making it even harder to get restorative sleep that night.
It's a loop. And this is exactly why the interdisciplinary wellness community, so we're talking psychologists, integrative practitioners, neurobiologists, they're all converging on this idea of whole person health.
Because everything is connected.
Everything. You cannot treat cognitive fatigue with isolated brain training apps or sheer willpower. Mental clarity is inextricably tethered to how well you manage that systemic biological load.
Okay, so practically speaking, how do these practitioners actually suggest we fix this? I mean, if the old question was, how do I forcefully perform better? What is the new question we should be asking ourselves?
The new question is, how do I create healthier conditions for resilience?
Conditions for resilience.
Right. It represents a massive paradigm shift. It moves us away from trying to conquer our biology and toward cooperating with it. Since you can't eliminate the stressors of a 9-to-5 job or just, modern life, the goal becomes building intentional biological micro-recoveries into your day.
Micro-recoveries to deliberately activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
Exactly.
Okay, give me the mechanics of a micro-recovery. How do I manually flip the switch from fight or flight back to rest and digest without, needing an hour of meditation in the middle of my workday?
It basically comes down to utilizing the body to signal safety to the brain. Because the brain is locked away in a dark skull, it relies heavily on your breathing and your vision to understand if you are actually safe.
Okay.
For example, the sources detail the power of the physiological sigh. It's a specific pattern of breathing. 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a long, extended exhale through the mouth.
And what does that do chemically?
The double inhale fully expands the alveoli in your lungs, pulling in maximum oxygen. And then that long, slow exhale forcefully slows down your heart rate.
Oh, I see.
When the heart rate slows, it sends a signal through the vagus nerve directly to the brain, essentially saying, the environment is safe, you can power down the cortisol production. Just 3 or 4 of those breaths can actively shift your nervous system state in under a minute.
It's literally a mechanical override for the stress response.
It is. It's a built-in lever. Another fascinating biological hack, and I use that word carefully here as it's a true biological mechanism, is utilizing panoramic vision.
Panoramic vision, like widening your gaze.
Exactly. When we are stressed, our pupils dilate and our visual focus narrows. We get tunnel vision, which is great for focusing on a predator or, in modern terms, a stressful spreadsheet on our screen.
Right.
But keeping your eyes locked in a narrow focal state for hours on end, that physically signals to the brain that there is a constant ongoing threat.
Wait, really? So just by staring at our screens all day, our visual system is telling our brain that we are in physical danger.
Precisely. The brain equates narrow focus with high alert tracking. To reverse this, you can step outside or simply look out a window and consciously soften your gaze to take in your entire peripheral vision.
Just unfocusing a bit.
Right. Engaging panoramic vision physically relaxes the ciliary muscles in the eyes, which again sends a bottom-up signal to the brainstem that there are no immediate threats in the environment. It automatically triggers the parasympathetic nervous system.
This is a completely different way of thinking about taking a break. Usually a break at work just means minimizing the spreadsheet and opening a social media tab.
Yes, which is not a break at all.
Right, because biologically you haven't changed your focal depth, you haven't changed your breathing, and you haven't removed the cognitive load. You are literally still resting your foot on the brake pedal while the engine runs.
And that is why people reach the weekend and feel completely hollowed out. True cognitive wellness requires an understanding of our ultradian rhythms.
Ultradian rhythms, not circadian.
Right. Just as we have circadian rhythms that govern our sleep over a 24-hour period, we have ultradian rhythms that govern our energy cycles throughout the day. The brain is generally capable of high-frequency focus for about 90 minutes.
90 minutes?
Yes. After that, the nervous system naturally begins to shift into a recovery phase, which usually lasts about 20 minutes.
Oh, so that's when you get that sudden urge to stare blankly at the wall, or you read the same sentence 4 times in a row without comprehending it.
Yes, that is your biology asking for the 20-minute recovery phase. But what do we do in modern corporate culture?
We see that dip in focus as a weakness.
We do. We try to override it with caffeine or sheer willpower. By ignoring the natural recovery trough of the ultradian rhythm, we steadily accumulate a massive biological debt by the end of the day.
So to actually achieve cognitive wellness, we have to start honoring the trough. We have to realize that stepping away, utilizing panoramic vision, letting the brain defocus, it isn't a distraction from work. It is the very foundation that makes the cognitive work possible.
And it takes so much immense pressure off the individual. When you understand the biology of allostatic load, the lymphatic system, and ultradian rhythms, you stop viewing your lack of focus as a character flaw.
You realize it's a deeply intelligent physiological system doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting you from an environment it perceives as hostile.
Exactly. This shift changes the conversation entirely. It moves us away from this aggressive, punishing relationship with our own minds and toward a relationship based on awareness and support. Nurturing your cognitive wellness is about checking the conditions of your environment.
It's recognizing that you cannot separate your mental output from your sleep quality, your physical health, and your emotional safety.
And it requires accepting that the goal is not a flat line of zero stress. I mean, we need challenges to thrive. The goal is elasticity.
Elasticity, I love that.
A healthy nervous system isn't one that never gets stressed. It is one that can easily and efficiently return to baseline after the stressor has passed.
So let's look at the biggest takeaways from our deep dive today. First, we need to completely abandon the mechanized view of human cognition. You are not a smartphone, you do not have background apps you can just force close.
Absolutely not.
Second, the widespread burnout we are seeing everywhere is not a failure of individual willpower. It is a systemic crisis of recovery. Our nervous systems are suspended in activation, and we are burning immense amounts of metabolic energy just to maintain a baseline of functioning.
And third, true cognitive wellness requires addressing the actual biology of that recovery.
Mm.
It requires protecting the architecture of your sleep so the brain can physically clear its metabolic waste. It requires stepping away from digital inputs to allow the parasympathetic nervous system to finally engage.
And it requires realizing that your brain's plea for rest is a biological signal, not a weakness to be hacked. Which leaves us with a final, slightly uncomfortable but deeply necessary question to ponder as we wrap up today's deep dive. We've explored the biological mechanisms of how our brains actually function and recover.
Right. And so if true cognitive wellness relies so heavily on our nervous system's ability to transition smoothly from activation back to deep recovery,
Yeah.
how many of our normal daily habits, like sleeping with a buzzing phone on the nightstand or consuming an endless emotionally charged feed of news the very moment we open our eyes, how many of those are we accepting as a standard way to live when they are fundamentally biologically incompatible with the rest our brains actually need?
That is the exact kind of question that forces you to look at your daily rhythms totally differently. If you have been feeling mentally drained, remember the biology. You are not broken. You might just be operating in an environment that is constantly pulling from your reserves without ever providing the conditions you need to refill them. Thank you for taking the time to slow down, step away from the noise, and explore this with us today. We hope this deep dive helps you look at your own cognitive wellness with a lot more compassion and a lot more respect for the remarkable biological system you are working with. Take care of your conditions, and we'll catch you next time.